So let's back to the second part. I just want to reveal the first part, which is still running here. So the first thing we did, we create the database underneath the SQL Server Object Explorer or Lab 3 Part 1. Then running a script, we created a professor table with its columns and the student table with its columns. So once we finish the database first approach, we move to the creation of the model. So we created the professor model and the student model, and both professor and student, they represent the entity, which is the database tables. They, they, they are kind of mirror of the database. They usually have the same fields, sometimes the same restrictions. So to connect both database and project, we had to create our context. So the context, we call it, it's kind of man in the middle, something that's handle all the requests, saving data on the database, retrieving, updating, deleting. And we did that underneath the data table, and we call it DB context, lab3 DB context. So to use all the functions of the Entity Framework core, we had to create our lab3db context class and inherit it from the db context. We had to create a constructor with some options here, and to reflect both our tables, we created two database sets with the same name of the table. There is a way to use different table names and database set, but I don't need to show you right now, maybe in the future, but just be aware that it's not mandatory to have the same name as the tables. It's preferable using the plural, but just because in this case it's not needed to be teach how to use different table names and database set names, so I want to keep it simple. So if you want a further explanation on how to use ASP.NET MVC or ASP.NET in general, I highly recommend you going to the ASP.NET website. You can go to the Learn option here, go to Web, then there is a simple steps here to understand a little bit about the Hello World using the ASP.NET tutorial, but then go to Next Steps and Web Learning Materials. Once you click here, there's a bunch of options. You can use either movies, videos, recording videos, what else? You can use some documents, more videos, and then just go down here to get started with ASP.NET Core, MVC, and Visual Studio. And here you can start your journey with ASP.NET Core MVC. So there's the get started, the add a controller, the add a a view, adding a model, work with the database, some policies, and many other things. So I highly recommend you going through all those steps to learn efficiently and to learn well how to do the things correctly. So for the second part, the thing we need to do is basically almost the same steps, but most of the things will be created automatically. Why automatically? It's because we're going to use the feature called entity framework migration, which means we create the model first, which is student and professor, its attributes and the restrictions. Then we run some commands with which is related to the migration framework, and then the migration framework creates automatically in background for us the script to create the database. If the database doesn't exist, the script to create the tables, and then what we just need to add are the controllers and the views. So let's go here, close everything here. We're going to create a new project. Let's call it lab 3 part 2. It's also ASP.NET Core web application. Web application model view controller. If we go to the Solution Explorer, we have here the second project. However, I was expecting to have two projects on the same solution. So just a second, I'll close the solution here. I will open here my lab 3 again. And I'm going to left click here. I'm gonna add existing project. If you remember the path of the last project you created, you just go to the place you saved it, and then add the CS purge of the project. Or if you don't remember, let's delete it and add a new project again. So new project, ASP.NET Lab 3 Part 2. Let's see the folder. Okay. Okay, now it's okay. I want to see both of the projects under the same solution. They have different names, but you know the first one is the part 1 and the lab 3 part 2 is the part 2. Okay, so now what we need to do is to change this project to run as a default. So set this as a startup project. So you see there's no white bold font here. So it means when we click on the run button, it runs the second part, not the first one. So let's build this project specifically. So just left click and build. Okay, it's working. So all we have to do now is go to the models. We need to add a new class called professor and create the same fields. So it's same fields and same restrictions. I'm not going to type all again, just going to the professor, copy that to this one. If you remember well, just mouse over the attribute, control dot, or click on the light bulb, and then using the system model, it should be fine. Do the same thing for student, create another one here, add new class student, it's empty, go to the first project, copy the student properties, go back to the empty one and place there light bulb using system and build the project again. Okay, it's building. So now what we need to do is open the package manager console. If you don't have this, go to tools and you should be able to see the Nugget package manager and click on package manager console. So what I'm going to do now is to enable migration. Oh, it's not a command anymore. I should only add migration. Student underscore professor. Okay, let's see here. So we created a project. Okay, now we need to create our contacts before we create the migration. Okay, Okay, let's create it manually. I was trying to see which create it using a scaffolding, but it's all automatic and we want to understand what's going on. So let's create our database context first. So let's create a new folder here called data. Let's create a class for the lab3 db context part 2. We need to inherit it from db context, and we need to click on the light bulb and add Microsoft Entity Framework core. Add the constructor, and then add the sets, db set for our models, professor, control click, using, then we need to register the context. So we need to go to the startup and add the line of code for the db context. So let's go to the solution explorer, startup, do the same thing we did on the part 1, services dot add db context, which is our lab 3 db context part 2, light bulb, edit, let's add the use SQL server. We need to light bulb, add the library, configuration dot get connection string. The name of the connection string is db context only. So which connection string? We're going to copy the same connection string of the last project. However, we're going to change the name of the database. So everything is the same except the name of the database. We're going to change it to lab3 part 2, the catalog. Then the third step is creating the database using the NuGet package manager and adding migration. To open the package manager console, add migration student professor. The reason why I type it student underscore professor is because we are creating both student and professor tables at the same time. So here we have the code. Then we go back here and update the database. If we open here, we don't have the database yet, but once we run it, it's done. Let's open it again, refresh, and we should have our database lab 3 part 2 and both tables professor, student, and the migration history table, which is part of the migration framework. Okay, once we've done that, let's see the next steps. So we use the entity framework migration to generate database named. We also created a student, signed data annotations. Now we're going to generate the controllers and the views as we did in the last project. Let's go to controllers, left click, and add a controller using the MVC controller with views and entity framework. It's referenced by the class professor from the lab 2, part 2. The context is also part 2. I don't know what went wrong. It's running, but it's not working. The scaffolding, let's see what's going on here. I don't know if you guys had the same error, but I am reopening the project. And it's working. So let's do for the student also. So I have both controllers and views, professors and students. And now I'm going to the layout under shared. Add two list items for both professor and student. So I'm referencing the professor's controller, the first method, which is the index, and the name of the link professor. The same for students, the name of the controller, the name of the action, which is index. If I go here on the students controller, the first action, which is the first load of the page when the user clicks on the link, is the index, and the name of the link is student. Let's run it. So we have professor and student. Let's test the professor first. There is no professor. Let's create a new one. Let's see if the teaching hours is working. So the user typed letters, but it's only allowed numbers. So it's working or validation. If the user tries to create an empty teacher, we have the validation. We also have the correctly caption displayed here. So let's create the same thing. Phone number, great. So we are all set for this professor, and let's do the same for the student. Same thing if you try to create a student without any field, let's create it, and we have all these warnings. So let's back to list. The table is working. We can list, we can add it, we can also see the details page and delete. So it's all we have to do for this lab as part 1 and part 2. All we need to do now is to clean the solution so we don't bring any garbage when we zip the solution. We left click on the solution, open the folder in File Explorer, go one step back, and let's see how we need to upload this. Compress the two projects. With our first and last name. So let's left click here, compress the project because it's opening. I'm gonna duplicate mine. The reason why I couldn't zip the first one is because it's opening. So and it's done for upload. So let's do the process once again, just talking about it. So for the first one we call it database first, which means we create a database script, then we generate the classes based on the database. And the second one we call it code first, which is we create the models, professor and student. Then once we add migration, we create the steps to generate a database script and to create our database, part 2. And the difference between one and another is the second one, the code first, it's way faster than the first one. And it also we create another table called migrations history, which contains all the histories of modification we do along the project. So it's way easier and faster. However, it's the way we do more mistakes when we create fields for databases, because usually people don't see exactly the size of the fields. For example, they can create, I don't know, a field called age, student age, for example. Being an integer. So if you go to and search for the size of the types, you see that integer is one of the biggest one to represent small fields like ages. So let's see here. So for example, the int size, it's 4 bytes, 2 or 4 bytes, depends if you are using negative or not, and you can hold a lot of numbers. So if you transform this integer to the size of the database, you're going to spend a lot of memory for something that goes from 1 to 100. So try to avoid those mistakes. For example, if we're talking about age, I would use student age, I would use byte instead of integer. So that's all. If you have any questions, just let me know. Send me a message. Find me at the college or whatever. I'll be there to help you and see you.